Have you ever found yourself staring at one of those pointillist paintings in a museum?
Oh, yeah. Like the Seurat ones.
Exactly, the one with the people in the park.
A Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte.
That is the one. If you walk right up to that canvas,
Yeah.
I mean, literally nose to the glass close, it's just chaos.
Right.
Just completely random dots.
It's a mess of green and blue and yellow specks that don't mean anything. But if you back up, maybe 20 feet, suddenly those chaotic specks resolve into a woman holding a parasol or a dog running through the grass.
It's the classic example of how distance creates meaning. The image itself doesn't actually change, but your relationship to it does.
Right. And here's the thing that really hit me while we were prepping for today's deep dive. Geography, specifically the way we analyze data about our world, is exactly like that painting.
Mm.
Except in geography, the picture doesn't just get clearer when you move your position. It actually changes into a completely different picture. That is the perfect way to frame it, because today we are talking about spatial puzzles. And specifically, a concept that sounds kind of dry on paper, but is actually mind-bending in practice.
Scales of analysis.
Exactly. Scales of analysis.
So we have a stack of notes here based on AP Human Geography Topic 1.6, and the central argument of this source material is honestly a bit unnerving.
It really is.
It suggests that the quote-unquote truth about poverty or disease, wealth, or even something as simple as rainfall depends entirely on how far you zoom in or zoom out.
It is unnerving because it implies that two seemingly contradictory things can be true at the exact same time.
Right.
You can have a country that is just booming economically, right?
Right.
While simultaneously having a province within that country that is completely collapsing. And if you don't know which scale to look at, you don't actually know what's happening.
So our mission for this deep dive is to verify that. We want to give you, the listener, the actual tools to look at a map, a graph, or a news headline and spot the hidden patterns.
Because the source material calls this the beating heart of human geography.
The beating heart. That's a strong claim.
But for good reason. Without understanding scale, we are essentially functionally illiterate when it comes to data. We see a statistic, we believe it, and we just move on.
But usually we've only seen a fraction of the reality.
Exactly, just one tiny fraction.
Let's get into the surgery then. The framework uses a specific hierarchy. We have 4 distinct levels or scales of looking at the world. But before we even list them, I feel like we need to clear up the word scale.
Definitely. Because when we say scale in this context, we aren't talking about a bathroom scale.
Right.
And we aren't talking about the little ruler in the corner of a map that says, 1 inch equals 10 miles.
Which is exactly what I immediately thought of, the cartographic scale.
Most people do. It's the natural assumption. But today, we are talking about the scale of analysis. Think of it as the container size for your data.
Okay, the container size.
Right. Are we putting all the data into one giant global bucket? Or are we sorting it into millions of tiny neighborhood buckets?
Okay, that makes total sense. So let's start with the biggest bucket, the global scale.
The macro view. This is looking at the entire planet as a single unit of analysis.
The blue marble view.
Essentially, yeah. But it's not just about seeing the whole physical Earth. It's about tracking processes that completely ignore borders.
Right.
The research emphasizes that this scale has really become the dominant story of the last century.
Because of globalization.
Precisely. We are talking about phenomena that are supranational. If you want to understand the internet, or international banking flows, or global climate change, you cannot just look at a map of France.
Because France doesn't contain those things.
France does not contain the internet.
Right. CO2 molecules don't stop at customs and show a passport.
They do not. And think about the supply chain. If you're trying to track the components of your smartphone, a national scale map is absolutely useless.
You just see a phone factory.
Right. You need to see the flow of rare earth minerals from Africa to factories in Asia to consumers in North America. That is a global process.
So the key takeaway here is that the global scale reveals universal trends. It answers the big question, how is the human species doing?
Or how is the biosphere doing? It gives you the high-level averages. But, and this is a really crucial point, it deletes the details.
Smooth everything out.
It creates a smooth narrative that might be incredibly misleading if you try to apply it to a specific person.
Which brings us to the next level down, the regional scale. Now this one felt a bit slippery to me in the reading.
It can be.
Because region seems so vague. What actually defines a region?
It can be vague because it's flexible by design. In geography, a region is really just an area where places share a common characteristic. It's a chunk of the world.
A chunk.
Yeah, a chunk. But that chunk can be defined by almost anything.
The text mentions a few different flavors. You've got the massive geographic ones like Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia.
Right. Those are usually defined by physical proximity or continental boundaries. But you can also have regions defined by a shared culture.
Like,
think about the Arab world or Latin America. Those aren't single land masses. They are cultural and linguistic zones that span across multiple different countries.
or economic and political regions. The European Union is a region. NAFTA, or I guess the USMCA now, is a region.
Exactly. And this is where the analysis starts to get really interesting. When you switch from global down to regional, you stop seeing humanity as this one big monolith and you start seeing blocks.
You start seeing the North versus the South.
Yes. The developed versus the developing.
It's like the resolution sharpens a bit. You start to see differentiation.
You do. The regional scale is where you analyze relationships between groups of countries. If you're looking at why NATO exists or how the Sahara Desert affects migration patterns across 5 different countries, you are working firmly at the regional scale.
Okay, zooming in one more click. We hit the one that I think dictates most of our daily lives, the national scale.
This is the default setting for almost all of us. We are deeply conditioned to think in terms of nations.
It's how the news works. You turn on the TV and here, unemployment is up in Germany. Healthcare access is changing in Canada. The U.S. GDP is growing.
The national scale bounds the inquiry by political borders. And this is vital because functionally, this is where laws happen.
Right.
You can have a global trend of drug use, but the laws regarding it happen at the national scale.
So if you are looking at a map of the world, but the data is colored in country by country, like France is blue, Spain is red, Germany is yellow, that's a national scale analysis.
Yes. And that's a very common way to consume information, but it comes with a huge assumption. It assumes that everyone inside that border is experiencing roughly the exact same thing.
It assumes France is just a single data point.
Which we know isn't true.
Which leads us nicely to the bottom of the ladder, the local scale.
The weeds. This is the subnational level. Provinces, states, counties, cities, zip codes, even census tracts.
This is the sensory scale. This is where you actually live your life.
It really is. This is where you analyze traffic congestion in downtown Chicago or the location of food deserts in East London. This is the scale of not in my backyard.
The research made a really interesting point here. It said that the local scale is often where the intensity of a problem is actually felt.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Think about it. A national unemployment rate of 5% sounds completely manageable. It sounds like a cold, safe statistic.
Right, 5% is nothing.
But if you zoom in to a local scale, maybe a specific manufacturing town in the Rust Belt, that rate might be 40%.
Wow.
Suddenly, it's not a statistic anymore. It's a full-blown crisis.
But we have the hierarchy down.
Yeah.
Global, regional, national, local. It seems like a neat set of stacking dolls.
Right.
But the source material throws a massive wrench in the gears right here. It warns about a trap.
The trap, yes. This is the absolute bane of AP human geography students and, frankly, a lot of professional journalists.
Let's hear it.
It is the confusion between map scale and scale of analysis.
I had to read this section twice because intuitively they sound like synonyms. Map scale and scale of analysis.
They do sound identical, but they measure 2 completely different things.
Okay, let's break it down for everyone. Map scale is just how zoomed in the camera is, right?
Correct. Map scale is the physical extent of the area you are looking at. If the map shows the whole world, it has a global map scale. If it shows just the city of Boston, it has a local map scale. It's purely about the frame of the picture.
Simple enough. But scale of analysis is about the data.
It's about the container. How is the data grouped? How is it averaged out before it gets put on the map?
This is where the source suggests running a few mental scenarios to test ourselves. And I want to try this on you and on you listening. I'm going to describe a map, and you tell me the scale of analysis.
Okay.
Not the map scale, the analysis scale.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Scenario A. Imagine a huge map of the entire world pinned to a wall. You can see every single continent. But on this map, every individual country is colored in a different shade based on its population size. France is dark red, Canada is light pink. What is the scale of analysis?
Okay, so the map shows the world, so the map scale is global.
Right.
But the data is locked to the borders of countries. You are comparing France to Canada, so the scale of analysis is national.
even though I'm looking at the whole world.
Yes, because the data isn't telling you about the world as a unified blob. It's telling you about individual nations. The unit of measurement is the country.
That is tricky. Okay, scenario B. Same map of the whole world. But this time, we aren't coloring countries. We are coloring massive geographic zones.
Yeah.
North America is entirely blue. Europe is entirely green. The Middle East is yellow.
In that case, the data is grouped by chunks or regions. You've aggregated the countries into larger groups, so that is a regional scale of analysis.
Got it. Okay, last one. Scenario C. We changed the map entirely. Now we are looking at a map of just the United States, just one country. But inside that map, every single county is colored differently based on who they voted for in the last election.
Okay, so the map scale is national. You're looking at one nation.
Correct.
But the data is broken down into tiny subunits, the counties. So the scale of analysis is local.
So the golden rule here is don't look at the frame, look at the pixels.
Look at the aggregation. If the data stops at the border, it's national. If the data stops at the county line, it's local. If you miss that distinction, you will completely misinterpret what the map is claiming.
Which leads to the really big questions. So what? Is this just semantics for academics, or does this actually change how we understand reality?
It changes the reality itself, or at least our perception of it. The core problem the text identifies is that single-scale analysis is essentially a lie of omission.
A lie of omission.
Yes, it smooths out the rough edges.
There was a rainfall analogy in the notes that I thought really nailed this concept.
The ecological fallacy of averages.
Unpack that for us.
Imagine you are a politician looking at a national scale map of your country's agriculture. The data says that, on average, the country received, quote-unquote, adequate rainfall this year.
So I look at that, I see the green check mark, and I say, great, no food shortages. We don't need to send any emergency aid.
Exactly. The policy decision is made. But if you adjusted your zoom lens to the regional or local scale, you might see a totally different horror story.
Because average creates a middle ground that doesn't actually exist in the real world.
Right. Maybe the eastern region is under 10 feet of water from a massive flood, and the western region is in a catastrophic drought.
Right.
If you mathematically average a flood and a drought, you get adequate rainfall.
But nobody's actually experiencing adequate. Half the people are drowning and the other half are starving.
And the national scale completely hid that suffering. It literally erased it from the decision-making process. This is why the source emphatically says scale dictates policy.
It seems like a recipe for disaster if you use the wrong one.
It really is. If you use global data to solve a local problem, you will fail. You can't fix a pothole in your street with a UN climate treaty.
No, you cannot.
And conversely, you can't fix global warming by recycling one plastic bottle in your kitchen. You have to match the scale of the solution to the exact scale of the problem.
This brings us to probably the most compelling part of the research stack, the case study.
That's a great one.
The text uses life expectancy to show how the entire narrative flips upside down as you turn the dial.
It's the perfect metric because it's visceral.
Yeah.
We're talking about how much time you get on this earth, and the answer depends entirely on where you are standing when you ask the question.
So let's start at the top again, the global view. If an alien looked at Earth's life expectancy stats, what do they see?
They see a triumph, a miracle, really. If you look at the global scale since about 1950, the line just goes up and to the right. Life expectancy has increased nearly everywhere.
We're living longer. Infant mortality is down. This is the classic view that things are generally getting better.
Correct. The global narrative is one of undeniable progress. But let's zoom in. Go to the regional scale.
Now we're comparing continents.
And suddenly the story isn't progress anymore. The story becomes inequality.
Map splits.
It splits hard. You see that while the average is up overall, a person born in Western Europe or North America can expect to live into their 80s. But a person born in sub-Saharan Africa might arguably expect to live into their 60s.
So the global progress is hiding a massive regional gap.
A gap of 2 decades. That's huge. But let's keep going. Let's dial it down to the national scale. The source points out a really stark contrast in East Asia.
This one jumped out at me too. You have China and Myanmar. They literally share a border.
They are direct neighbors, but if you look at the data strictly at the national scale, you see the massive impact of politics and economic development. China's life expectancy is pushing 78 years. Myanmar is sitting around 65.
That's a 13-year penalty just for being born on the wrong side of an invisible line.
That's a generation of time. Think about it. Grandparents seeing their grandchildren grow up. That time is lost. The national scale reveals that political borders are effectively walls of time.
That's a profound way to look at a border.
Yeah.
But here is the twist that I really loved in the reading. We assume that in a wealthy country like the U.S., the national number, which is around 77 or 78, applies to everyone.
And that is the biggest lie of all. If you zoom into the local scale down to the county level in the United States, the variation is just shocking.
We're talking about the zip code lottery.
We tend to think, okay, California is healthy, Alabama is unhealthy, and at a state level, that's generally true based on the data.
Right.
But the data shows that there are specific counties in Alabama, affluent suburbs perhaps, that have higher life expectancies than rural or impoverished counties in California.
Wait, so a wealthy person in the unhealthy state might easily outlive a poor person in the healthy state?
Absolutely, because at the local scale, massive averages wash away and specific factors dominate.
Like what kind of factors?
Access to a specific high-quality hospital, or the presence of a massive highway causing local air pollution, or living in a food desert where you literally can't buy fresh produce. Those local realities dictate your lifespan.
So if I only looked at the state map, I would have just assumed everyone in California is doing yoga and living to 100.
And you would have entirely missed the pockets of deep, deep struggle within that state.
This really brings the whole concept home. The global story says we are winning. The regional story says the West is winning. The national story says the rich countries are winning. And the local story says, well, it depends on your street.
And the synthesis, the real mind bender here, is that all of those stories are true.
It's like a chord in music.
Yeah.
You need all the individual notes to actually hear the harmony.
Beautifully put. If you only listen to the bass note, you don't hear the melody. If you only look at the local level, you miss the structural forces of the global economy.
But if you only look at the global,
You completely miss the human suffering at the local level.
So we've gone from the whole planet down to a single neighborhood. We've defined the 4 scales, we've learned how to spot the map scale trap, and we've seen how averaging data can hide actual disasters.
It's basically a toolkit for skepticism.
I really like that. A toolkit for skepticism.
Yeah.
So how does the listener apply this tomorrow morning?
It comes down to pausing. We live in a world of rapid-fire headlines. Crime is up. The economy is crashing. A virus is spreading.
Real estate is booming.
Exactly. When you see a headline like real estate is booming nationally, you need to stop and ask, okay, but what is the scale?
Because a national boom might just mean prices are skyrocketing in 3 major cities.
Right. Skewing the entire average while the rest of the country is completely stagnant.
So you have to ask yourself, what story is this data hiding at the local level?
And conversely, what bigger picture is this missing? If you see a local factory close down, that's a tragedy for that town. But if you don't zoom out to the global scale, you won't understand why it closed.
You won't see the massive trade shifts that actually caused it.
Exactly.
So the lesson here is, don't ever settle for the single story. Adjust your zoom lens.
You'll be surprised at how much the picture changes when you do.
Well, thank you for diving in with us today. Keep looking closely at those spatial puzzles. Next time you see a massive national trend reported as absolute fact, ask yourself, who is being erased by this average?
We'll see you next time.